Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. When you're right, when you're being honest, you don't have to change the subject. You don't need to draw a complete tangent point and try to make some twisted argument. When you're being honest, when you have an answer, when you have a retort, it should be quick, matter of fact, just like we used to see with Kayleigh McEnany during the later years of the Trump administration. But with this new administration, with the Biden regime, and with Jen Psaki bot 2.0 Karine Jean-Pierre, it's nothing but dishonesty. And you know that it's dishonest because Karine Jean-Pierre isn't very talented. She's not very good at lying, freestyling, riffing, and so she's constantly caught unaware, unprepared, and she has to either ignore the question entirely or pivot every single time, looking absolutely shocked, looking totally unprepared, and giving us the perfect image to represent the utter dishonesty of the Brandon regime. And boy, oh boy, was this moment in the White House press room just incredible. Let me show you guys this amazing question that was asked of Karine Jean-Pierre. Let's talk about her response, and of course, let's talk about just how dishonest Joe Biden's regime continues to be and just is in general. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so I watched pretty much all the White House press briefings, and for the most part, it's slow, it's boring, people ask uninspired questions, let's just leave it at that. A bunch of mainstream media shills who don't really want to shake the boat, they don't want to hurt Democrats in this current environment. But every now and then, a journalist will actually do their job. A journalist will tackle the administration head on. Sometimes it's hard to know what the motive is. In a case like this, it's possible that they're asking this kind of question because they're trying to send a sign to the administration that their talking points, their rhetoric, comes off as incredibly disingenuous and dishonest, and so they're trying to, reflect on their talking points so they can maybe start to reform themselves a little bit. But anyways, I'm getting distracted trying to analyze what the possible motive of the question is. The point is, every now and then, you get moments like this.
Today, the president seemed to be countering some of this GOP messaging on the economy, and he told people that Republicans like to call Democrats big spenders and people should look at the facts. But the facts don't seem to be exactly how he's painting it on some of these issues. He has claimed repeatedly that the administration reduced the deficit, but if you break it down, spending was high because of the pandemic, those programs expired, and that brought down the deficit, and then that deficit reduction was spent on canceling student loans, and then on the jobs claims that he made. He said that President Trump was the first since Hoover to lose jobs during his administration, but and he claimed that he had created 10 million new jobs, but in reality, those jobs have mostly been added back, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics says only about 514,000 jobs have been newly created. So how are people supposed to take this kind of messaging on their most important issue seriously when some of this feels like smoke and mirrors?
Well, let me tell you what the American people should take very, very seriously. Let me remind you of the Trump tax cut of 2017, $2 trillion that was not paid for, So I want to be very clear about that.
Do you see what happens when this administration is questioned properly? Do you see how the whole thing falls apart? The whole house of cards tumbles. This is what the media should be doing 24/7. This is what we do 24/7. This is what all the independent commentators are always covering. But isn't it a breath of fresh air when the mainstream media does it? Joe Biden's ridiculously dishonest, garbage talking points, as if he's created 10 million new jobs. I mean, what a jerk. The way he attacks Donald Trump as being a president that lost jobs during his presidency, which is complete bogus. The way they manipulate the data with pandemic data in order to make cheap, dishonest political attacks. The way Joe Biden tries to take credit for reducing the deficit from record high spending during the pandemic to now. I mean, the guy is just so incredibly dishonest. And then he goes and basically meets the previous deficit with his student loan forgiveness nonsense. Isn't it a beautiful thing when journalists actually do their job? These are the questions that mainstream journalists across the board should be asking all the time. And this right here, this moment is why they don't. Because when they do, Karine Jean-Pierre looks like a fumbling, stumbling incompetent who just doesn't know what to do when confronted with the truth. She immediately freezes and tries to think of something that she could say, and then pivots to Donald Trump's tax cuts, and then goes on to say that it was unpaid for. Yeah, tax cuts don't need to be paid for, dummy. That's spending plans and expensive Democrat bills. Those need to be paid for. Tax cuts are kind of the opposite. Of course, what she's saying is that Donald Trump's tax cuts lead to the government not being able to collect enough in tax revenue to pay for all of their fancy proposals and fancy socialist spending dreams, which is such a ridiculous point to make. I mean, the money is better off in people's hands than it is in the government's hands. But how ridiculous does Karine Jean-Pierre look here? Like a fish out of water. She's constantly stumbling and fumbling. She's all over the place. To be completely frank, she's just saying random crap all the time. I mean, it's almost as if she gets it from Joe. Just invent it as you go. There's also this from that same press conference.
But it's very clear. If you think about what Democrats want to do, if you think about what congressional Democrats and this president have already done, lower costs. If you think about what we're doing with our economic policies, creating jobs, making an economy that doesn't leave anybody behind, but builds it from the bottom up and the middle out, that is so incredibly important. And what congressional Republicans want to do is take that all away.
I mean, where does that even come from? Joe Biden and Democrats have delivered lower costs. What? How could you say something like that and expect people to take you seriously? And then claims that Republicans want to take that all away. I mean, she's just saying things. There's no facts, there's no data, there's no validity to anything that she says. She just says things and then walks away and pats herself on the back and says, "Great job, Karine Jean-Pierre. You answered all of those questions tremendously." You're just saying things. She's literally just making it up as she goes. Yes, Democrats have delivered lowering costs even though gas prices are double, and they've led the Western world into an inflation crisis, an economic crisis. And Republicans are going to take that all away. Please explain to me how. Oh, well, you see, the Donald Trump tax cuts. These people are awful, but at the end of the day, they're just a representation of their boss. Like I was saying earlier, she gets it from Joe. She gets it from Sleepy Joe. This is what Joe Biden does. This is what a lot of these politicians do. They just invent things. Actually, here's a great example. Joe Biden just did a little event with Now This News. Hard to call it news, but anyways, Now This, where he said this.
Secondly, if you don't have one of those loans, you just get $10,000 written off. It's passed. I got it passed by a vote or two.
Joe Biden claims his student loan relief package was voted on. It was an executive order using the HEROES Act, which is an emergency act that they're using totally incorrectly. No one ever voted on Joe Biden's plan, but Joe Biden just says things. Whoever's in front of him, whatever he's got to say to gain favor, he just says. The facts don't matter. Oh, we'll deal with the facts later. That is what this administration does. Oh, we delivered on lowering costs. No, you didn't. You can't just say that. We created 10 million jobs. No, you didn't. You can't just say that. But they do. And they do it over and over again when it comes to every single issue. They don't operate in a world of facts because facts destroy their narratives. And what would the poor Democrats be without their precious narratives? Clearly, they would be nothing. And what would the Democrats be without their allies in the media? What would this administration be if the entire press corps was asking hard-hitting questions and getting the facts straight in their dealings and in their coverage with the Democrat establishment? What would the Democrats be if they didn't have their precious media allies? They would be nothing. This is what happens when you ask them real questions. The contrast is once again so clear. The Trump administration had to deal with a media that wouldn't only scrutinize, but would actively push propaganda, would actively push and give merit to fake news and fake stories, an activist media and a White House press corps that were downright hostile. And Kayleigh McEnany was there absolutely decimating narrative after narrative after narrative with facts and data. Could you imagine if Democrats were held to the same standard? Could you imagine how much of a disaster it would be for them? It would be like the Karine Jean-Pierre video that we played at the start of the video, times 1,000, over and over and over again. That's why this change at CNN is, in the end, going to be a good thing. Is it going to completely redeem CNN? Probably not. But at least if they have some journalists who are showing up at that White House press briefing every single day asking relatively decent questions, it's going to change the playing field entirely. Democrats will no longer have the cloak, the protective cloak that they currently have. At least they won't have all of it. And if the media can just shift a little bit more towards the center, boy, oh boy, is it bad news for the Dems. Lord knows, I hope it happens. We could really use a little bit more media honesty. That's what I got for you guys though. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. I'm going to get back to work. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.